All right. So hopefully folks can hear me. We still have a few minutes here, but I just wanted to check and make sure the microphone was actually working as well as the audio in general. So, okay. Thanks so much for coming, folks. Like I said, I was running long here, so I'm going to try to rush it, and it may end up being a little mangled. Is what it is. Okay, I'll be back in a few minutes. Actually, I haven't watched the digital replicator stuff. I mean, I always tell myself I need to come up with new demos for the waiting room, but then I never save enough time to actually work on it. But you know, this is pretty cool, actually, right? I mean, this is the 4-cell diamond. Only a couple of them managed to actually make it to all 4 cells, I think. But you see, yeah, those 2 splits there, that's now a 4-cell, two pairs. They're heading towards each other in the right-hand side, and I think that they will actually meet up. And yeah, so there it is. That's a 4-cell multicellular creature built on top of all of this, you know, moving and screwing around and you know, just you know, I'm always rushing on to the next thing. I need to stop and smell the bits every so often. I mean, it is kind of cool. And I was thinking about how, I mean, you know, I really do accumulate design patterns and tricks and knowledge that get reused in the subsequent projects, even if there's an overall design change, like going from digital replication here to sensory motor control with BV in the current project. Anyway, so be it. All right, I did not forget where we are here. Hey folks, it's T2sday and the T2 Tile project. We're trying to build a whole new computational stack from the bottom up that can be indefinitely scalable with as much hardware as we can possibly imagine. For the last 6 months, we have been using this simulated robot that we call BV and trying to build this indefinitely scalable architecture to represent its sensory motor system, to represent a brain for it. Let's see how it's going so far. So BV had a mission, and the researchers and developers had a plan, sort of, with lots of bugs. Yellow balls in a herd tended to confuse BV, meaning that recovery strategies were inherently important. And there were all sorts of hang-ups that nobody had expected. And the researchers' three-way strategy of pursue, avoid, explore, although it worked pretty well, it had particular trouble, especially when switching between the strategies. There were lots of problems. But still, eventually. Pick a direction, BV. And sure enough. So BV cleared the table, running on the T2 matrix. This was a lot of fun. This was a ton of work, especially just because, the process of compiling this code and running this code, debugging this code is all very, very slow. And then, the running of it, that's all big time lapse that we're looking at that. But nonetheless, success. So starting from last October to, well, supposedly last May, but now, in fact, June, to demonstrate a sensory motor homunculus. It wasn't my fantasy, but I'm calling it. BV is that. So, challenge is completed 1 month late. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on inside BV's brain and talk about what my plan is to put myself on the record once again for the rest of 2024 and end up with the schedule. So This is my attempt at a clickbait thumbnail. It's an homage to the fish, not a fish thumbnail, which worked fairly well for a T2sday update quite some time ago. Let's just make a full screen of that. Okay. Now we can move on. So, as you probably saw, well, I mean, it's all hard to see what's going on in the actual demo, but what we ended up with was 3 overall behavioral strategies, which I call grips. Like, you take a grip on a tennis, you can have a tennis racket, you can have a forehand or a backhand grip, you use them for different purposes. So we have explore, pursue, and avoid as the 3 major strategies for it. And, the background, it looks kind of green, but that's actually supposed to be yellow. These photographs of the T2 matrix of BV's brain running haven't been color corrected, so they're a little bit off. But so pursue is the early Breitenberg vehicle from the start. The red is the avoid, where if you see red, you want to back up and get out of it. Works most of the time. And then finally this blue case. And, the diamond, which represents the current extent of BV's brain, it's not just changing colors so that we can see what grip is in effect. It's also changing colors because the entire brain needs to know what the current grip is. So when it's blue, when it's yellow, when it's red, everybody knows that, okay, I'm supposed to be routing the signals according to the explore rules. I'm supposed to be routing the signals according to the avoid red rules, and so on. Now, I see kind of a big difference between avoid and pursue and explore. But, if we look in the actual vehicles book in chapter 4 or something, talking about how to make more complicated of these vehicles, all we have to do is introduce special elements and connect it to each other, and that allows us to do logic and have brains and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, but for me, the distinction between avoid and pursue, which are completely stimulus response, they are based on stuff that's coming in from the outside and then making decisions on the outside on the one hand, versus explore, which is based on internal decisions that are not visible in any obvious way from the outside. So to me, this is an important distinction worth keeping, because, down here where it's react, we're talking about combinational circuitry, sort of flow through. You can do it in a single pass. Whereas up here, once we have internal state, once we have these, all we have to do, threshold devices that can be connected to each other, now we're not talking combinational logic anymore. We're talking sequential logic, and the computational properties of it are totally different and, vastly more complicated. So how does explore work? Well, the key is this little blue thing down there. That is a single hidden unit, one of these threshold devices, kind of what Breitenberg was talking about, that has actually got a event counter in it. It just counts up and up and up, and then wraps around to 0 and so forth. And it makes decisions about what to do, like should we spin around now, or should we go straight for a while? Should we spin clockwise or counterclockwise? It makes decisions based on various bits of the counter, which are supposed to be essentially random with respect to what's happening out in the world. I'm not convinced it really works out that way, but the point is, once we are in the once we are in the explore grip in this picture, the TOC actually sends signals up to the motor commands directly. So it says things like, go straight, turn clockwise, counterclockwise, and so on. So let's take another look. Well, let's take a little bit look at a little bit more BV, since this is the big final exam. We saw when it worked in the lab, but now let's see what happens on the day of the big presentation. So no red, alternating with blue. And look at that. That's pursue and explore, flickering back and forth. And it does that a lot. There it is again. And you can see how it's kind of, BV's a little bit jittery when that's happening, because there's kind of different decisions being made depending on which part of the brain currently thinks it's in pursue and which part thinks it's in explore, and so on. BV's actually having trouble with those two, splitting its attention, even though they were far apart. Okay, that's good. Got another one. Explore. Yeah, and there's the jiggering back and forth between avoid and explore. To me, it looks like it's like, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. But of course, it is. And, you know, sniffing around the Earth's until basically it doesn't see enough yellow to be interested in it. So it's like the Pacific is the only thing that's keeping this Earth ball from being kicked off the table as well. Now we're down to the last couple here. Zoom and again, an awful lot of, it seems like, wasted time where, you know, you just turn clockwise. Why don't you turn counterclockwise? And so BV is acting like, you know, the world's cheapest Roomba, you know, sort of first version. And all right, so be it. So, he's got one left. Let's, I think he picks it up now. I think it picks it up now. BV's pronouns are it. There it is. Okay, so that's BV's brain. It's exactly like Breitenberg said, that there's, you know, when you look at this stuff bottom up, it's very, very easy to interpret intentions, motivations, you know, love, fear, aggression, all that sort of thing. And it's mostly metaphorical, but it's got a germ of truth. It really does. Okay. Next, what's the rest of the year about? Well, you know, here we are on T2sday updates. I'm running late, so I'm going to not play the T2sday intro bumper that we haven't seen for a while. But over on the Dave Ackley channel, there's also this Hyperspace Academy that has videos every once in a while, like 7 years apart. And this is the opening bumper from the most recent one. And I want to smash these two together. In particular, this symbol here, it's called the self-image. I want to get that into BV's brain. So the self-image, just very quickly, it is a representation of 4 computational processes: input, output, sequence, internal thinking, and judging positive or negative. And, you know, BV's already got input and output via its serial loop spinal cord and everything. But now we want to have internal sequencing, which talk is a very, very simple, lame example of. And then judge, am I doing well or doing not so well, which BV has nothing really equivalent to it. So there's the self-image icon again. And again, this is building on a paper that Lou Wilson and I sent out that we're going to hear later this week. Whether this paper has a chance of being accepted, so we don't know yet. We shall see. So, for the rest of 2024, the T2 Matrix Self-Image Implementation Challenge. In 2024, implement all 4 self-image processes on the T2 Matrix, improving BV's ability somehow, so that it's less like a Roomba and more like one of those Dyson smart things. And that's going to be it. So here we are in June. We're going to end at the 3156 in November. Going to take December off, well, the rest of November and December off, and then we'll continue. We'll pick up again in January afterwards. So that is it. The goals for next time for July is basically do some internal work, help out BV a little bit more, and have a lot more fun. So I've run late. So I'm going to stop, but thanks so much for stopping, and I hope to see you next time. All right. There we are. Uh, 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 hey, folks. Thank goodness. Uh, uh, Thanks so much that so many folks were able to actually show up live today. That's really very encouraging. uh, um, and when I was using BV's title cards for the thumbnails for the updates, as far as random YouTube viewers, they did terribly. So I'm trying to go back to a little more human face, a little more goofy stuff, a little more make fun of myself stuff, which is great. I just never think of it. I don't think of it soon enough, especially because I have this crazy expectation that I have to have the thumbnail ready ahead of time so that, according to my own stupid ethics, the thumbnail should be a frame from the actual video rather than something that you pay a thumbnail creation expert, 6 months after it's made to make it successful. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so that's it. I will, David Kiersey, Ben Krulos, hi. Schlabbermath, yay. Thanks for coming. And I'm gonna turn the AC on because it's getting hot in here. And maybe just go ahead and I'm gonna mute the microphone for a minute so that I can turn the AC on without horror show. But I will keep it going, and I'll come back to react to any comments if there are any, and so forth in a minute. All right, so I cooled the room off a little bit. uh, um, so I've been wondering about keeping the live streams up after they take place. Uh, um, and I did a little poll on the YouTube channel about it, or I didn't do a poll. I just did a comment, and a few people reacted, like Samter, uh, um, and because it's a funny thing that I really I want to demo. I want to not just read a speech, then anybody could do it. I want to actually react. So there's the act versus react thing, right? But I want to have a closed loop so that there can be some mutual reaction back and forth, little chit chats, little bits of dialogue. Instead of just the presentation, and that's why the doing it live is so important to me. Even though it makes the if you compare it's like it's like improv, right? Everybody hates improv because it's supposedly being like a story, which would be something that's like a script, except officially speaking, there is no script. So improvisation ends up being lousy scripted stuff. But if it's done well, if you can actually be genuine in the moment of whatever it happens to be, then the performance itself, the behavior itself, is a more or less genuine demo of this hardware running under these circumstances and reacting to whatever degree, questions from the audience and so forth. Uh, um, and so I don't want to do I don't want to do the work to write a script and then memorize a script or read the script from the teleprompter. I hate reading from the teleprompter. I feel like it looks totally fake, and I've tried it several times, and some of it I just put notes on the teleprompter so that I still try to ad lib, but so I spent a career teaching, or at least the second half of a career teaching, and that's, for good and for ill. That's what teaching is, right? Reacting to the folks that are in the room. Okay, yeah, David. Not sure it's a design question, rather understanding the localization of intention versus reaction. Well, if I'm understanding what you're saying, yes, it seems to me that in some extremely basic sense, you can have a stimulus coming in from the outside, or you can have a stimulus in your head, but the fact that the stimulus is spatially located inside your control, inside the volume of space that you claim for your body, the volume of space that you are holding and would presumably defend as best you could, versus the signal source being outside and coming across the boundary of what you claim as your stake in the physical universe, makes a huge difference. And you analyze it differently, study it differently, implement it differently, and so on. And, there's the whole idea of stigmergy, is trying to do as much of the computation as you can by reacting rather than by acting, where acting is, it's the moral equivalent of you have a script. You have a clock, you have a timer, you have a pacing, you have something going on inside that allows you to do your karaoke script rendition or whatever it happens to be. Act versus react, key in understanding how life, yeah, act versus react is really fundamental to me. And I there's lots of different takes on why it's fundamental, but then there's lots of other things that also are fundamental as well, depending on the circumstances, the surrounding context. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I prefer to React, but and I feel like, I've developed my computational landscape, my code transmissions, my code database, which I'm now trying to share, for reacting, for trying to be able to understand where people are coming from, and to be able to understand where people are coming from, to be able to empathize as far as possible. And if people are being jerks, then the empathy can only go so far. But that's the challenge: is to find the good that you can, and call it out, and let the rest of it go to the degree that you can. And if if we are collectively or individually pushed into fighting, then that's lose-lose, versus having found an alternative way around it. But, sometimes it happens. We are limited creatures. We can compute as much as we can compute and no more. So anyway, I don't know how exactly I got onto that. Well, it's because of David's good comments and questions, I guess. All right. Well, so maybe we should call it, and I'll go get the rendering and see about the rest of the day. Well, again, folks, size speed, I don't know if you're referring to there's a YouTube comment thread that I had where I was talking to somebody and had a Synac that was sort of misfired a little bit. I'm not sure if you're referring to that or just taking it in the straight. I'm not sure whether you're reacting or acting in that sense. Yeah, sure. All of the protocols, the network protocols, internet stuff, and so forth, every communication protocol has to have two sides, and they have to at some point be unsynchronized, and then at some point become synchronized enough that communication can happen, and then communication ends. And there's all sorts of different ways to go about it. And, typically one side or the other technically goes first. I make a connection to your port number, and you accept that connection, even though once the connection is established, it's essentially symmetric. You can send in both directions, but in order to express the interest, right, one side has to initiate, or you have other protocols which are broadcast based and so on and so forth. Whatever it is, it's fine. But we can use network protocols like the three-way handshake and SYN and ACK and NAC. We can use that stuff in addition to using it literally in code bases and IP and TCP. We can use it metaphorically for understanding synchronization processes with each other. I mean, there's been a lot of research coming out in the last year or two about how people fall into sync, people become synchronized when they interact. When they're telling stories together, their brain waves start synchronizing, and when people sing in choir, in choruses, their hearts start to synchronize. Did I read a paper about that? I think I did. And on the one hand, that seems like really spooky weird, because I think I am a wall, I am a rock, I am completely independent of the world around me. But the instant I start to communicate with anybody, we start having interactions. We start to phase lock into each other. Even, I suppose, if it's fight, there can be a certain kind of phase locking there as well. It's not something I really know much about. But I want to think of communication in terms of generalized phase locking, generalized ring oscillators. A discussion, a dialogue is a ring oscillator. I say something that causes you to say something, which causes me to say something. The initiative passes back and forth. That's what a ring oscillator does. And so to me, I'm happy to think of that we are oh, hey, Tim, hi. And I'm happy to think that, there's not a single program counter in the middle of my brain, that there's no single clock that's going to everything. There's, all this stuff that's all loosely synchronized. It's sort of on an as needed basis. And the hardware has fallen together over the eons of evolution and so forth, so that things sync up enough to do whatever they do. But there's no hard and fast line between stuff that synchronizes within me and stuff that synchronizes between me and the world around me, or me and others like me who are outside in the environment. And so it's just on a case-by-case basis that we want to say, okay, what is phase lock? How big is the phase lock space-time volume here? And when we come together for a live stream and we're actually live, so 20-second delay or whatever it is, but all of the folks in all of those different spaces are all now phase locked to some degree in some fashion. That's perfectly real. I mean, that's as real as any other degree of synchronization. It's a complete spectrum, and we want to understand what happens in the world by looking for these phase locking relationships, and we want to make things happen in the world by building phase locking relationships, by building gain, by getting more amplification, getting more instances out there that are phase locked to whatever our movement is, whatever our mission is. Synac Ackley. Yeah, okay. Anyway. So yeah, and it's funny because CPU and RAM, everything is synchronized to the global clock, everything is synchronized to the program counter, and multi-core and so on and so forth. But the classic basic version is still the icon for all of this stuff. So when I reacted away from that, when I got tired, when I got bored building stuff out of CPU and RAM, which, it took a long time. It took from high school through after graduate school, until I was, postgraduate, whatever. And A-Life was a lot of what drew me away from CPU and RAM, but it was also about building distributed systems, and distributed systems don't really get along with CPU and RAM. The CPU and RAM model is fundamentally about stop the world. I'm working. When I'm done, I will tell you the answer, and then you can let the world go again. And ever since, even all the way back into grad school, and then afterwards at the research labs, when I did CCR, the whole point was it being a distributed social network of its modest little day, where the whole point was to avoid the centralization of Facebook, which didn't exist, but to avoid the centralization of the MUDs, which is what did exist at the time. And I've been pursuing distributed systems ever since. I think it's really critical to the success of any group or organization how well it is able to harmonize these actions between its members to achieve its core goals bottom up. Yeah, I agree. And it's this dance of top down and bottom up that it really has to work together. Because in my mind, bottom up is like Hollywood, where you have all these people with all these skills, you have all these actors, you have all these Steadicam operators, is the example I always use. but no movies get made with those things all just sitting there. There needs to be a top-down script. There needs to be a top-down thread. There needs to be a top-down intention at the very least, plus enough resources accumulated to be able to push it through. And so, it will succeed if you have good bottom-up elements that are supremely expert at their own tasks and also expert at working together with the other tasks that are necessary. And then, if you get this synergy between, okay, we love the script, we love the movie, and we love doing what we're doing, and then maybe you get a hit, and, maybe you don't. But the point is, you built this large construction, you built this large machine, which produced this, 90 minutes of pixels and sound and whatever that are just so far beyond the possible imagining of what mere physical process could produce, 2 frames of that, let alone 90 minutes of it, that, there it is. And I feel like, certainly in my Western upbringing, that, I got inculcated with top-down's more important. And I feel like the tech bros and the Silicon Valley and those sort of things, they tend to buy into the top-down's more important. And, in the United States, we barely even teach bottom-up stuff. In graduate school or even undergrad and stuff, an awful lot of it, the actual skills part of it, you were just supposed to accumulate. Here's the set of papers we're going to read this semester. You don't have to come to class. You just have to be able to respond to intelligent technical questions about all this stuff at the end. Anyway, so yeah. And so I'm trying to be sort of a little bit of an advocate for bottom up, a little bit of an advocate for, let's be explicit about technique. Let's be explicit about implementation. Let's be more like, I don't know, a culinary school or something. I've never been to a culinary school. And David, eigenspaces and killing vectors. Killing is the last name of a mathematician. Okay, I know bits and pieces about eigenspaces, but I don't know about killing vectors. So I'll have to Google that later. Youngblood, I'm finding more and more it's balance. Yep, the less bottom-up capability you have, the more control is required to function at all. But you don't function all that well, right? You're fragile because you don't have the capability to respond to variation, which typically needs to happen at the space-time scale that the variation occurs, and also just much more effectively can happen at the appropriate scale if the upper scales are ready to tolerate a reduced amount of error, but still some error. Absolutely. Only takes a little direction. Yeah, that's what I think. And my fantasy with the movable piece machine and robust first and indefinite scalability is that we can speak into lots of different communities, lots of different skill sets and so forth, with enough resonance that we can get some phase locking, we can get some amplification happening, even though we are few, even though we are few in number. We'll see how it goes. Maybe one more story and then I'll try to wrap this up. I was speaking to the father of a girlfriend many years ago, in grad school. And he was a minister or a priest or of some kind, and he was asking, what I wanted to accomplish, and I basically said, I want to make the world a better place. I think there are these ideas out there, and at the time I was reading the Eastern religious stuff quite a bit. I may have invoked it in talking to this guy. I don't remember now. But that a lot of the ways that we're looking at stuff in the West is either radically incomplete or actually kind of damaging in some significant ways, and I think we could do better. And the girlfriend's father was like, and do you expect to actually succeed at changing the world? And again, he didn't say it that way, but that's what the message I got. And my reaction was, well, I'll pull my way, and the rest of the world can pull its way, and we'll see where we end up. And that's what I felt then. That's what I still feel now. And every so often we're getting little bits and pieces of traction. And I feel like, the living computation theory of everything video, which everybody should see, is an important step forward for me as far as beginning to develop ways to speak into broader communities and perhaps make a little sense. Perhaps find some resonances that we could build on and build up. We shall see. Okay. Well, it's almost 1:15 and it's getting hot in here again. I kind of wish I had the time and effort to rebuild this whole studio, but, only so many hours in the day. Well, hey, folks, thanks so much for stopping in today. Thanks so much for making comments and questions. I will do my best, David. I will keep it up. Until next time. Yeah, and somebody was saying, I think I saw it on the Fediverse, was saying about how everything happens on YouTube now rather than, I don't know, books or mass media or something. Everything happens on, YouTube was the example they used, because genuineness was more important than authority or something like that. And it's like, well, I can do genuine, whether it makes sense to anybody or whether I end up blurbling so much of it that it really can't make any sense to anybody except maybe me is a separate question. But yeah, you too, Tim, and everybody. I look forward to talking with you again in July. Okay, so I'm going to end the stream now and turn on the AC.